relationship with stress hormones to sex hormones. And then on Wednesday, we're going to talk more specifically about female reproductive cycle, women's health, a little more specific with the hormones for women's health. But we will definitely get to them today. So first of all, I'm going to start with the sex hormones and stress hormones and kind of what the difference are there and how they affect each other. And then I'll go into how our connection with nature and with our cycles affects how we feel. And then we'll go into some of the yoga, Ayurveda yoga philosophy with Apana Vayu and Prana Vayu and how that affects our bodies. So we have lots of stuff to be able to cover, and you can just save your questions to the end, and I'll be more than willing to answer any questions that you have. All right. So first of all, we have the stress hormones and the sex hormones. So the stress hormone, the major stress hormone would be cortisol. And we all know about cortisol. Cortisol does have a purpose. So we definitely need cortisol because it has its purpose in giving us energy. So we'll just keep that kind of generic, like it gives us energy. And that's the idea. That's what it needs to do for us. So when we go into a fight or flight response that our body reacts, our cortisol levels help us to be able to maintain that for a period of time. And then it's supposed to dissipate. Okay. Our sex hormones are progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. So we do have all three hormones, and they relate to each other at different times of our cycle. And we'll go more into the cycle on Wednesday. So today we'll cover a little bit more basic on the hormones and how they interact. Okay, so estrogen helps to build in our bodies. So when we're talking about estrogen, estrogen dominance, all that kind of stuff, it means it's going to build stuff in our bodies, whether it's good stuff like the uterine lining or whether it's bad stuff like cysts and things like that. So we want to make sure that we keep that regulated. And the way that we regulate it is with progesterone. So progesterone helps to regulate the levels of estrogen. When progesterone levels drop, this means that estrogen levels don't necessarily rise, but what happens is they're unmanaged. So our estrogen levels don't have a manager, which is progesterone, to be able to keep them in balance. Testosterone helps give us energy. So usually it's energy for productive and like male dominant things. So if you think of male versus female, men tend to be more like linear, focus, do the thing, right? Women tend to be more like gather, bring together, bring things together, bring people together. So again, generically speaking, so testosterone gives us energy to be motivated, and it also helps for our sex drive. So we definitely need that. We definitely need that in our life too. Okay, so then going into how it affects us. So in nature, we are supposed to be in this cycle. Okay, so we have a 28-day cycle, 26 to 30 days, give or take a little bit. But we also are connected with the lunar cycle. So lunar cycle would be the cycle of the moon, right? So the moon has 28-day cycle. The sun does not have a cycle. It rises in the east and falls to the west. It looks the same in the east as it does in the west and all day long. It might look a little bit different according to what color it is in the sky, but it's pretty much the same thing the whole time. Where the moon changes every single minute. It's changing size and it's changing brightness. So the female cycle, the female reproductive system, the female hormones also reflect that. So every day, our cycle is just a little bit different than it was the day before. So depending upon where you're at in your cycle, no matter if you've went through menopause or you're going through perimenopause or you're in your reproductive years, it doesn't matter. The cycle still happens. It just happens at a little bit different levels. And we'll talk way more about that on Wednesday. Okay. So then in Ayurveda, we have what's called the Ayurvedic clock. And this clock determines where we need to be able to rest and where we need to work. And even in our cycle has different times when we should work a little bit more and when we should pull back a little bit more and rest. So in the daylight cycle, so during the day, we need to be working, and at night, we need to be resting and digesting and detoxifying. So when we follow this cycle of the daylight cycle, our body has time to work, to break down, and then time to restore and to heal. And this is important because a lot of us are running ourselves a little bit ragged, a little bit thin. We're doing a little bit too much in our lives, right? How many of us are guilty of doing a little bit too much in our life? Yeah, amen to that, right? Yeah. So I'm just as guilty. I've been through phases of it where I'm like, okay, I need to pull back. But I can say that since I have really connected with my cycle, so I have a very, very consistent 26-day cycle, very consistent. And since I've really connected and tapped into it, I have noticed a significant difference in my body's ability to be able to recover and taking some time to be able to rest. It doesn't mean I take off whole days or the 4 days of my cycle. It just means that I take off chunks of the day or maybe even a day in there where I can just pull back a little bit or don't schedule things as hard or push as hard those days. And so it does reflect on the rest of the cycle and then into the next one. So there's a lot to be said about taking time to be able to rest and to be able to pull back. Um, all right. So a lot of what happens is we get into these, we get kind of get into a rhythm, right? We start working and we start working and we start working. And then pretty soon it's like it feels pretty good. And then we start going, we push a little harder and we push a little harder. And then society pushes us a little bit harder and pushes us a little bit harder. And when we do this, we start to activate the levels of our hormones in our body start to shift a little bit. So first of all, our body starts going into a perceived fight or flight. And this is where things start to get a little bit wonky. So when our body goes into fight or flight, it is because it's trying to protect us from either a threat or a perceived threat. All right. If it's trying to protect us from a threat, it's a good thing. So what happens is it releases adrenaline, and then we have a little bit of time, and then it releases cortisol. And then cortisol goes through our system, and just generically speaking, it shuts down our immune system, our digestive system, and our reproductive system, because we do not need those systems to be able to save our life at that point. So cortisol affects these systems drastically. So in a very serious situation, it's needed because we need to be able to flee or we need to be able to fight to get away from the danger. If it is a perceived stress, so if our mind makes up some sort of perceived thing that's going to happen that probably doesn't happen, our body reacts in the same way. It does not know the difference between it doesn't know the difference between a perceived stress and an actual stress. It doesn't have the shut off point to say, hey, this isn't real. We have to actually cognitively say, this is not real. I need to redirect my energy in another way. So, that being said, if you have a perceived stress, so if you have a worry, if you have an anxiety, if you start looping thoughts, your body releases adrenaline, it releases cortisol. You have a little gap of time to be able to shut it off before it starts really circulating in your system and affecting your body. But how many of us really realize when that happens? So we start getting worried and start getting worked up about something, or we get angry at somebody and we hold on to it. This is one of those examples when, I mean, this goes around in like the Facebooks and the social media feeds. How often do we focus on the one thing that goes bad during our day versus the 50,000 things that go right during the day, like getting up, being healthy, being able to eat, being able to stand, being able to walk? Like, how often do we give gratitude for the little things in our life, but yet we focus on that one little thing that went wrong during the day and we fixate on that? So that's what's going to release the cortisol levels in our body. And when that's constantly happening, cortisol's constantly getting released in our body because of our perceived stress. This is where it becomes an issue, because what it does then is it's shutting down the immune system. It's shutting down or affecting our digestive system in some way, shape, or form. And it's definitely shutting down our reproductive system. And I say reproductive system in that loose term, whether you're going to have kids or not have kids, that's irrelevant. It still affects your hormone levels and whether or not you have hot flashes or you have PMS or you have mood swings, which affect all of us, no matter what age we're in, whether we're in perimenopause, menopause, or whether we're trying to make humans, okay, or pre-making humans even, pre-baking years. So we want to make sure that we can either stop the cortisol release or not let it happen at all. And that's really hard. I mean, we've all got a lot of stress going on in our lives, and we've got even more stress because life has significantly changed in the last year. And it's the holidays. Like, holidays throw another whole different equation into our life. And again, it depends on our personality. Is our personality, are we people pleasers? Are we trying to always drive harder and push harder and go for that goal and pushing ourselves like a man versus pushing ourselves with a woman? So if we push like a man, we are going to deplete ourselves because we're not designed that way. Our hormones aren't designed that way. But if we push like a woman, this means that we're taking care of ourselves along with it. So riding that delicate balance between working and being able to recover. That's why a lot of times, and this is the big difference between men and women, is that when men start to get stressed, the one thing they need to go do is go work out. They need to go chop some wood. They need to go dig up some dirt. They need to go fix an engine, because their testosterone relies on them using and building energy. Ours, on the other hand, it's usually because we don't have enough progesterone. And if we don't have enough progesterone, what happens is our body's running on estrogen. And estrogen is a little crazy because it can't manage itself. It just keeps on building, keeps on building, keeps on building. And when estrogen dominance happens, and I don't like to use that terminology. My teacher always said, it's not estrogen dominance, it's progesterone deficient. So progesterone deficient means we don't have enough progesterone to keep our estrogen in check, to be able to keep it in balance. And when it's in balance, we feel good. Like things don't change. Our hormones kind of just, our mood levels just kind of do their thing. We don't have weight gain. We don't have menstrual cramps. We don't have menopausal symptoms, because our body is in check. When progesterone's not there, there's nobody regulating that. And our progesterone is our more of a rest and digest type hormone. It's the hormone that's calming for our system. So we want to be able to nourish that. So when women start to fatigue, the first thing we need to do is rest, and really deeply rest. And we need to eat deeply nourishing foods, and we need to do deeply nourishing practices. And we need to spend time with our girls. And we need to be able to vent things off our chest so it doesn't sit there and rot in our soul. So these are things that are hard to do sometimes, because we're taught we're supposed to be independent. We're supposed to do the thing, right? We're supposed to do the thing just like guys do the thing. We're not made like guys. We do the thing very differently. And that's why when women do things, it's just a little prettier. Okay. So talking about apana and prana. So we'll go back into the hormones and how they affect, but now we talk about two different values that we use in Ayurveda. So when I look at clients, I look at how is the effect of prana, which is upward movement, and apana, which is downward movement. So downward movement is the movement down and out of our bodies. So feces, urine, reproductive tissues, so our menstrual cycle, period, and then having a baby. So that's all downward movement out of our body. Upward movement is bringing energy into our body. And this relationship is just like the hormones, just like estrogen and progesterone, they work together as a team. So during different times of our cycle, we want that energy to go up. And other parts of our cycle, we want the energy to go down out of our body. And when this balance happens right, we have no symptoms, we have no issues. And the symptoms and issues that we have in our reproductive system in Western does not exist in cultures that haven't been affected by Westerners. So they don't know about these issues. When I talk to some of my teachers, they're very surprised by how many female issues we have in the United States because of the way that we don't take care of our bodies. We don't listen to our bodies, the fact that we run ourselves completely thin. And some of it is just like, it is life, right? We have different challenges that show up, but it is being able to realize when you're at a threshold, before you get over that threshold, to be able to pull back and say, you know what, I need some time. I need to get away on a vacation from everybody, or I need to go for a walk in the park. A lot of times, ladies, it isn't even that you need to take a whole vacation. If you get to that point, man, shit's real. But if you can do it, if you can manage on a daily basis, a lot of times it's building a routine. So Ayurveda talks a lot about building that routine. So having what I call the bookend philosophy, where you start and you end your day the same. And this consistency is what creates a lot of balance in this body right here. And again, the demands during the month can be a little bit different. But if we have this consistency of the way we start and we end our day, we build a really great foundation to be able to live our lives as balanced as we possibly can. And then when stress gets thrown our way, then we either have real stress and we deal with it. And then we learn to either not use or not anchor into the perceived stress, or we process it and get through it so that our body can heal and recover from the cortisol. All right. So now going back to the hormones. So we've got the we've got apana going down and we've got prana going up. We've got our hormone levels. They're nice and balanced, and then something happens. So we go into a stress response of some kind. If our adrenals, these little tiny glands that sit on our back right above our kidneys, if they're working properly, they release cortisol, they function, it does its job. All right. So our brain tells our adrenals to release cortisol, do your job. Okay, great. It did its job. All right. What if this happens all the time? So our body's releasing cortisol. It's running through our system. Pretty soon our adrenals go, I don't have any more cortisol. I can no longer produce cortisol. Well, that's not acceptable because our body, our cortisol, our fight or flight, helps us when we are in a threat. Our body will shut everything else down in order to protect itself from being killed. So what it does is it borrows from our other systems. The other systems it borrows from our thyroid. It borrows from our reproductive system, so progesterone and testosterone. And then it affects our blood sugar. All right. So I'll cover these three topics next. So the thyroid, what it does is it will, it first goes to our reproductive system. That's usually the system it goes to first. So if our reproductive system has some testosterone, has some progesterone circulating through it, it'll take from that first, because progesterone and testosterone can turn directly into cortisol. All right. Estrogen cannot. So we've got this rogue estrogen kind of doing its own thing. We've got cortisol being produced from our progesterone and testosterone. So you suppose we're going to be a little out of balance with all the crazy high estrogen going on? Yeah, we are. So then once our ovaries are no longer producing, and there's other cells, pretty much every organ in our body produces estrogen, but not every organ in our body produces progesterone and testosterone. So our ovaries are the major producers of progesterone. And that's important because once they don't produce anymore, there's nowhere else to go. So then where does our body go? Our mind tells our adrenals, hey, yo, I need some energy. What do we do next? Well, more than likely, we're going to start getting cravings. All right. We're going to get cravings for sugar. We're going to get cravings for coffee, for shopping. So going on Amazon and buying stuff that helps our dopamine. So what happens is we get this instant gratification, dopamine rises, makes us feel a little bit better. All right. So then we have this cycle going on where our body is looking for the answers from something else. And we get these little dopamine rushes. So it gives us a little bit of energy. Our mind goes, hey, it's doing all right. And then pretty soon that runs out. Well, our thyroid is our main metabolizer. Okay. Again, this is a little bit generic, but it's our main metabolizer in our body. So what happens is we start pulling and drawing from our thyroid, the energy from our thyroid. When we start doing that, that's a pretty big issue. Our thyroid is one of the organs in our body, glands in our body, that takes the most abuse from the environment. So the environmental toxins highly affect our thyroid. And if our thyroid's working properly, our iodine levels are high enough to be able to detoxify our thyroid, and our levels are okay in our body, it can manage it pretty well. But when the thyroid shuts down, it can no longer keep our body from getting toxic. And this happens on a few different levels: environmental toxins, and then from estrogenic toxins. So estrogen that is in our environment, that is bad estrogen. So there's good estrogen and there's bad estrogen. Good estrogen helps our body to function properly. Bad estrogen is like if you're drinking or eating food that's got toxins in it. Some soy-ish, but there's a lot of different kinds of soy products. So that's not a direct one, but there's a lot of estrogenic type stuff. Coffee is one of them. If you're not drinking organic coffee, Coffee is raised in a very highly chemical environment. And that goes straight into our body as a estrogen toxin. So then our thyroid wouldn't be able to process that to be able to get it out of our body. And that's key. So then we're creating more and more toxic levels along with the extra stress, along with the extra cortisol. Can you see how this all plays a part? Like it's all pretty significant. And the things that we'll see is we'll see weight gain. So when women come to me and they're like, I don't know why I'm gaining weight. I'm like, okay. So we go through their health history form. We talk about what's going on. I'm like, well, I see it's your stress level. Well, I'm not that stressed. I'm like, that's not what I'm seeing, what you're telling me at all. And I think, we're, as women, we're so used to being under so much pressure, right? We have pressure. Yep, yep. Super mom, super woman, whatever. Oh my gosh. Don't be superwoman. Be pull back a little bit and say, you know what? I don't want to be superwoman today, because it's more work being in that and maintaining that, right? So once we start getting to a certain level, you have to maintain that level. And then you're expected to go up. And that's the problem with women working in the workforce so hard, is we feel like we're driving and driving and driving for the next thing to be able to grow and be able to get to this level. And it's like, is that really what we need when we're burning our bodies completely out, and we're having such horrible menstrual cycles, and we're having such a horrible menopause? If you struggled during your menstrual cycle, you will have a rough menopause. It's directly influenced. So if you can manage, if you can work on your menstrual cycle and you're still cycling, there's a lot you can do. Even if you're as old as I am, I'm 42. So even when you get into your 40s, you can still do a lot of work. In fact, it's the best time, because you tend to be a little more like, okay, I know I need to work on this, because this vessel is going to be around for a while and I don't want to suffer. And I worked with a lot of women that were turning 50. I had 5 women that turned 50 all the same year. And I was working on all of them with menopausal symptoms, and then endometriosis. So they had a lot of growths in their body, and you couldn't tell, like, these women looked vibrant on the outside, but their inside of their body was just damaged. And it was a lot of high stress. And some of them were workforce type stress, and some of them were caretaking type stress. And it was interesting to see the difference, but how closely related they are. So, um, there is so much I can still talk about, but there will be a whole nother lecture on Wednesday to be able to get in more detail about the female hormone cycle. So things that you can do is really connecting with what we call nature's laws in Ayurveda. So following the cycle of nature's laws. And this doesn't mean you have to be perfect. The idea is to be as consistent as you possibly can. So when I work with my clients, we work on the Ayurvedic clock. So going to bed and getting up the same time. Now, this gets kind of waved a little bit to the side if you're a nurse or doctor or shift worker. Then we start working on how can we balance that within that work cycle. But if you're just staying at home, if you're at home and you're Googling or watching TV till 12 o'clock at night, no, it's not acceptable. Like, I have no tolerance for it. I'm just like, nope, we have got to work on this. And I usually start with night before, because the night before, so 6 o'clock the night before, will determine how you feel at 6 a.m. in the morning. And what time you eat at night, what time you decide to shut off the blue screens and the lights and start dimming things down and quieting your body down at night will affect your next day. Your next day does not start when you wake up in the morning, although your mood can be enhanced or can be agitated in the morning, depending upon who's in your household. But your amount of sleep is because of the night before. And what we want to do is build the night before and then go into the next day. During the nighttime, our body's detoxifying. So we want our body to be as rested as possible through the afternoon and into the evening. If we're still wound up at 8 or 9 o'clock, guaranteed cortisol levels are high. If cortisol is high, cortisol shuts down melatonin. All right. Melatonin is the key for getting deep sleep. If your melatonin is not peaking at around or hitting pretty good at about 10 o'clock at night, you're going to have issues. If your body does not get good sleep between 10 and 2, according to Ayurveda, your body is not detoxifying at a cellular level, which is really important for brain function, for immune function, for digestion, for pretty much everything. So our body detoxifies, and it detoxifies our brain at night. And it's the only time our body detoxifies our brain, because during the day, our body's taking in all of this stimulus, all of this stimulus, all of this stimulus. At night, our brain processes all of the stuff that we've taken in, whether we're actively doing it in dreams, which some people do, or not. So the melatonin is the key. And so many people think I've done so much research around melatonin. I love melatonin. It's like my favorite thing right now. So melatonin is called a hormone, but it's not. It's actually a molecule. And this molecule is really fascinating, because we think of it as melatonin helps me sleep. It doesn't. It has really nothing to do with it. What melatonin does is it tells our body it's time to clean up, because we are going to rest and heal now. So it doesn't tell us to sleep. It tells our body that our daytime shift workers, internal, taking stuff in, are shutting down, and our nighttime cleaning crew is time for them to work. So melatonin does not make us sleep. It tells our body that it has to go into a different category. So it's pretty fascinating. And in Ayurveda, we look at how the daylight cycle affects that. As the sun starts to go down, our body starts producing melatonin. If our cortisol levels are high, our body will not produce melatonin. What happens in the morning when we wake up, to wake our body up, our body releases a little bit of cortisol to help us wake up in the morning, to shut off melatonin so our body can function. Another reason why we don't want to eat too late, because some of our bodies are going to release a little bit of cortisol to help digest food too. So cortisol's got a lot of responsibility in our life, and we often are riding so high on it that we can't really function properly. So I have a bunch of other stuff to be able to talk about, but I think I'm going to save it for Wednesday, because I would like to take some questions. So if you have any questions.